We've all told a little white lie here and there, right? Maybe to spare someone's feelings or just to get out of a minor jam. It's a very human thing to do. But what happens when lying isn't just an occasional thing, but constant? When it becomes so tangled and frequent that it just starts to poison everything around it. Okay, let's really get into what's going on here.
So get this. Research actually shows that, on average, most people tell somewhere between 0 and 2 lies a day. And these are usually small things, what some folks might call pro-social or maybe little self-serving fibs. A pretty manageable number, all things considered.
But just imagine for a second that number wasn't 2. What if it was 5, or 10, or even 20 lies every single day? And that right there is when you cross over from everyday dishonesty into the territory of something much more complex, pathological lying.
All right, so to really wrap our heads around this, we've got to start with a clear definition. What exactly are we even talking about when we use a term like pathological lying?
So the fancy clinical term for this is pretty wild. Pseudologia Fantastica. I love that. And the formal definition you see here really gets to the heart of it. This isn't just about telling lies. It's a long-term pattern, it's frequent, and often the reasons for the lies, well, they aren't obvious at all. Now, there isn't one single definition everyone agrees on, but this gives us a really solid place to start.
So, what does this actually look like in real life? Well, the lies themselves tend to be pretty dramatic, maybe even fantastical. They're told all the time. And a classic sign is that the stories almost always paint the person as either the hero or the victim. It's all about getting that admiration or sympathy. And it can get so bad that the person might even start to lose track of what's real and what's not, which, as you can imagine, causes huge problems in their relationships.
And this right here is a really important distinction. You might be thinking, hey, isn't that just compulsive lying? But it's not quite the same. Pathological lies are usually more elaborate, more manipulative. They're designed to create a very specific impression. Compulsive lying, on the other hand, is often more of a reflex, kind of like a bad habit that's driven by anxiety without a whole lot of strategic thought behind it.
Okay, so we've got the what, now for the how. Let's get into the practical side of things, our detective's guide, if you will. How can you actually spot the signs? It's time to become a bit of a human lie detector.
Sometimes our bodies tell a completely different story than our mouths. Experts often point to these nonverbal cues, things like avoiding eye contact or, funnily enough, holding it for way too long, fidgeting, giving really vague answers, or even physical stuff like sweating. But, and this is a big but, you have to take these with a grain of salt. These are just clues, not proof. Someone's personal habits or even their culture can play a huge role here.
So, what do you do if someone has an amazing poker face? Or what if you just can't get a clear read from their body language alone? What's next?
Well, when you can't rely on body language, you have to focus on the stories themselves. First up, listen for those inconsistencies. Do the details of a story seem to change every time it's told? Second, you could try to discreetly check some of the key facts with other people who might know what really happened. And third, if it's a serious situation, it can actually help to keep a simple record of what was said. That way you can spot the contradictions over time. It's all about finding the pattern.
Okay, so spotting the lies is one piece of the puzzle, but to really get it, to see the whole picture, we need to dig a little deeper and explore the why. Why does this happen in the first place? And check this out, there's some really fascinating science behind this. A 2016 study found that our brains literally adapt to being dishonest. The more a person lies, the less of a negative emotional response their brain has to it, and that just makes the next lie even easier to tell. It becomes the slippery slope, this self-perpetuating cycle.
So what's really fueling this cycle? Well, while the research is still growing, experts often point to some deeper issues. For some, it can be a way to cope with really low self-esteem, or to cover up past trauma. For others, it might have started as a learned habit that just spun out of control. And sometimes it's actually a symptom of an underlying mental health condition.
And this is a perfect example of that last point. Pathological lying is a pretty common feature in certain personality disorders. For instance, with narcissistic personality disorder, lies are often used to build up and maintain a grandiose self-image. For something like antisocial personality disorder, lies are more of a tool, used to manipulate others and to get ahead.
You know, all of this can sound incredibly challenging to navigate if it's someone in your life. So for this last section, let's switch gears and open up a practical toolkit for how to cope with it. First things first, we just have to acknowledge the reality here.
Being in a relationship with someone who lies pathologically, whether it's a friend, a partner, a family member, it is emotionally draining. It's exhausting, and it systematically destroys the one thing that any healthy connection is built on: trust.
So what can you actually do to protect yourself? This 5-step strategy is a really great guide. Number 1, trust your own reality. Don't let yourself get gaslit. Number 2, set clear, firm boundaries about what you will and will not tolerate. 3, you can encourage them to get professional help, but you have to recognize it's not your job to fix them. 4, you may need to honestly consider your options and if the relationship is just too damaging to continue. And number 5, which is absolutely crucial, practice self-care. You have to look after yourself.
And all of this brings us to the final and maybe most important question of all. Is there a cure? Can someone who lies pathologically actually change?
So here's something important you should know. Pathological lying isn't actually its own standalone diagnosis in the big book of psychiatry, the DSM-5. Instead, mental health professionals usually see it and treat it as a symptom of a larger, underlying condition.
But, and this is the hopeful part, there is absolutely a path to change. Several therapies have shown real promise. Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, helps people identify and change the thought patterns that actually lead to the lying. And dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT, is also really effective because it helps people manage the difficult emotions that can trigger dishonesty in the first place. So yes, change is possible, but it takes a real commitment from the individual and, of course, guidance from a professional.
And that brings us to our final thought for this explainer. We've seen just how complex this behavior is, how deeply it can be rooted in someone's psychology, and how incredibly damaging it is to our relationships. And it all leaves us with a pretty fundamental question to reflect on. If trust is truly built on a foundation of truth, what can we ever really hope to build from a foundation of lies?